Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our session, How Security Leaders Are Rethinking Risk in an AI-Driven World. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded and we'll make the replay available afterwards. Please feel free to drop your questions into the chat at any time and we'll address them at the end in the Q&A session. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Ed Higgins, Executive Director of Security and Compliance at Quisitive.
With us. My name's Ed Higgins. I'm a security leader with Quisitive. I've been here for the past 8 years, and I came here to develop our managed security services line of business, the hands to keyboard implementations. My job is to meet our customers, understand what keeps them up at night, and match the things that we can do for them to the things we offer, and create new offerings to help them solve the challenges that they can that they have. We do a lot of work in that Microsoft space, and when I started out, it wasn't as a Microsoft advocate, if you will. I was a DoD guy designing trusted compute and encryption models, and I ran a few data centers. I was a chief information security officer for 10 years. Two 5-year stints as a CISO, which is kind of good tenure. And one of them was to a 70,000 person healthcare shop. So I dealt with a lot of the challenges and problems that you all deal with. Doesn't see I know how to deal with everything you're dealing with, but I've been there myself. And that lets me relate pretty closely to what our clients are going through, especially with this, the advent of AI and how we keeping our data protected. What about the vendor and third party? What about those vulnerabilities? So, it's why I love sessions like this. It lets me match up things that I've been through that I know you're going through. And as a CISO, we're facing that inflection point where, traditional, scan, patch, repeat is kind of an after. It's kind of outdated, and it's falling behind because AI-driven initiatives are making the need for the ability to detect and close vulnerabilities much faster, not days or hours even, but minutes. And also, if you think about the attack surfaces, we'll get into these with some of the metrics, but the kind of what we're going to do today, what we're going to delve into today is kind of the need to speed up. It isn't about a monthly vulnerability scan, right? We buy our tool, we run the scan, we hand out the assignments to people to go clean up or harden a server or patch an operating system. That happening once a month or in days is way old. That's not, you got to kind of rethink that. So it's more about continuous. And Gartner has coined some phrases. We'll kind of showcase some of those things and kind of walk through the kind of the evolution of vulnerability management as it turns into exposure management, and being able to treat those surfaces in a continuous exposure management practice. That's what CTEM is continuous threat exposure management. So having said all that, let's kind of take a look at some of these things and see how they resonate. The failure of vulnerability management today is it's a volume problem. Vulnerability management is technical centric. It's not risk centric. So I run a scan against an operating system. Why did I run that scan? Is it that server is a higher priority than another server? Should I run all my servers to the same frequency and to the same appetite for risk? And so there's a kind of a process dichotomy there of like, should I run the same vigor to every device I've got? On one hand, you might say, yeah. On the other hand, you might say, well, I don't need to do it as much, but I need to do it and I need to apply it. So there's this kind of, how do I keep up with all the vulnerabilities that are being issued annually, 25,000 vulnerabilities each year. And they're coming out, and, just yesterday, there was a 0-day that actors were targeting, and it led to like immediate patch override. It wasn't Tuesday, like Patch Tuesday would say. It was like on the spot. So, these things happen. They need to be dealt with. And then the context gap, what is a critical score? A critical patch on a printer or a low on a printer. Is there one thing that is, higher priority? Is a critical CVSS score on a server or a printer the same? What about a low or a medium on a domain controller? That perspective is what the bad guy is counting on. That, say, for example, we don't patch our printers as frequently because they're on the inside, break the zero trust model. We don't have time for it, so we let it go. That's where the bad guy's going to go. He's going to target that. And he's doing it at machine speed. He's not doing it based on let me just see if they have printers. He's running AI against your environment to do the research and the reconnaissance and find out what you've got. And doing it through channels that, like, one of your own employees might, for argument's sake, just a kind of a point of context, I guess. So when an employee posts something on Reddit on a printer forum, I'm making it up now, so but it's likely and possible that person asks a question about I can't get the patch to apply or whatever, the scenario. When a bad actor is doing reconnaissance against your environment using AI, that type of information comes across their bow as well. Scary thought. They can do reconnaissance based on your own people asking questions how to fix an issue or, a forum somewhere. That if there's any public nature to it, that bad actor's getting goldmine information on your environment. Now, I stretched it a little bit to kind of accentuate the point, but if a bad guy gets in, he's looking at every device you've got, the printers, the file servers, the big behemoth data warehouse that is the gold mine. He's not going to target that first. That's his prize, but he's going to go somewhere else first, and he's going to use vulnerabilities to get there. And then bad actors using those LLMs, they're building their own LLMs. The thing that's different between you and me and our respective businesses and bad guys is that when we use AI, there's an ethics involved. When bad guys use AI, they're not playing by the same rules. They don't have to. They've got nothing to lose. They're bad guys. So they're breaking all the rules, and they're using LLMs that can violate those things that we would stand for and say that's not permissible in a normal AI environment. And those things that they're doing are creating code on the fly to target you, create zero-day attacks on the fly to penetrate a vulnerability that exists, even one that is just new emerging. The point I'm trying to make here is vulnerabilities are going to come up. We're never going to see them go away. Nothing's perfect. That's okay. But the speed at which we have to attack these problems as they get revealed to us is kind of been exponentially sped up, that we need to act on it very fast because actors are using machine speed against us for that type of thing. This was that part Gartner had kind of coined this phrase. It's actually a pretty decent thing. And if you kind of look at, it is what it is, the CTEM, or continuous threat exposure management, scoping, defining what matters the most in your business. So external attack surfaces, software as a service, those vendor relationships that you have, discovery, identifying those assets, the identities, the misconfigurations across your landscape. It's not just your Microsoft stack, but it's your Cisco equipment, your Palo Alto firewalls, where are all these assets that you've got, understanding them. That's full discovery of your estate. Some of you probably already got that. That's great. Some may not have that. And then exposures map to those things that go beyond the CVEs, the common vulnerabilities and exposures databases, into misconfigurations and other types of resources or resource issues, weaknesses. The next piece is prioritizing those things, ranking the risks based on the exploitability and business impact. A website, I once saw, nowadays, people would say you want to treat your website as, you want to fix it quickly because it could become a beachhead for, phishing and, things of that nature. Not so much the bad actor cloning your website, but using your own website as a land and expand type of a bot, if you will. But people used to say, if my website got defaced or spray painted, some kind of political jargon, or just some jokester got in and put their mark on your website, well, you just reload your website from backup and go. I'd argue that you probably wouldn't want to do that. Your business reputation is one that your presence matters. But people might say, I don't need to treat it like the same way I treat my patient, my healthcare patient database, my records about my patients, or my business. If that data got out, I'd be out of business. We'd lose our competitive advantage. So making decisions and prioritizing these risks in your estate, those assets you've discovered and the scope around them, prioritizing that is that next step in the triangle, the pyramid. And then validation, testing if a vulnerability can be reached. And it isn't from the outside versus inside. Zero Trust would say, let's not trust it anywhere. Your bar is up on all those surfaces, but looking at it like from a perspective of we've got good controls, or there's a physical isolation, or an air gap, or if it isn't an air gap, maybe it's a one-way switch, a diode that lets data through but not back, that kind of thing. Knowing your own environment and where those things are, being able to test if a vulnerability could be reached and exploited, and kind of looking at those things as like attack path analysis. If something happened here, what would happen? So running through what if scenarios, running tests against your environment. So validation is important. And then calling to action, putting butts in seats and mobilizing the team to act on those validated threats. And this is a continuous life cycle. It is a life cycle in stages. Just like incident response is a life cycle. It has a beginning and it has an ending that involves lessons learned and going back to the beginning again and looping on itself. There's a feedback loop there. And this is no different. It just looks at vulnerability in a continuum and says we've got to treat it that way. From the Microsoft standpoint, they built, actually a couple of years ago, they built what was considered the industry's true first. And even their competitors would say now they were kind of first to the market. And Microsoft might get beat up a little bit for not everything works perfectly. There's truth in that. They push in the envelope, but they are heavy in every magic quadrant there is. And when Microsoft puts their mind to it, they can dominate in other magic quadrants. They've done a really good job in the defenders. There's a lot of defenders, almost as many co-pilots. But in the world of Defender for Endpoint, Defender for 365, these signals, these trajectories are part of your estate or the estate. And Microsoft has done a pretty good job of bringing together what is called Security Exposure Management, or SEM, MSEM. And they love acronyms. So Microsoft kind of coined this a couple of years ago, and it's not just another dashboard. It's an exposure graph. And what it does is it understands the identity in Entra is the same entity as the user in Defender. It connects to connects the dots to show you user A has a weak password and they have access to a server that has a CVE, a vulnerability on it. And that server has access to a purview labeled sensitive database, kind of a sensitive database that is, has its labeling and stuff like that. Exposure management, or SIEM, security exposure management, kind of layers on top of that, and it allows, it's explicitly designed to help organizations build and enhance their program with that kind of Gartner life cycle in mind, from discovery through, mobilization, and being able to kind of go through that process and have the tools that will help articulate things and run in real time. So I wanted to show you a couple of things here and kind of walk you through the stages in line with, maybe some context of like the Microsoft view of things. The first stage, of course, is scoping, and it involves identifying your assets, if compromised, they might be the most significant impact to your business. This is about understanding where, we use the adage, the crown jewels, what makes you special, what makes you unique, what could damage you significantly if that stuff got out, like a hospital losing patient data is a pretty devastating exposure. The secret recipes for Coca-Cola or whatever, those could be damaging to that brand if they get out. So it's different things to different people, but these servers that host this data, or these applications that house this data are hosted, that's where your crown jewels are, and you need to know where those are. SIEM helps you identify where those are, because you've got asset management built into your Microsoft estate. Doesn't always have to be just Microsoft too. Other equipment can be populated in this. And the way the defenders work is they look at neighbors in the network, and they'll try to assemble what that is, even if it's not a Microsoft server. Could be a Linux box sitting on the wire, and it'll pick that up and say, this looks like a Linux box, I'm going to account for him. And so your discovery is supplemented by the power that is in the defender's ability to not scan the network. That's a kind of an over stretch, but it's looking at neighbors that are in and around those assets on network segments in your estate, and being able to determine what's there. And then taking that step and defining, using even predefined classifications, lets you associate level of sensitivity. There's a database with sensitive information, identity groups, user identities, groups, cloud resources, confidential VMs, virtual machines in Azure, key vaults, Kubernetes, service clusters. We use some of the things to get onto on-prem, like Azure Arc. That can help you see what's on your on-prem estate. Everyone has a little bit of on-prem, whether they want to admit it or not. There's something that gets you to the cloud in your physical office. That's the hybrid, that's the firewall, that's the router. Those things are important too, and they also have vulnerabilities. So we want to be able to pick those things up. Operational assets, we kind of refer to them as security operations assets, or infrastructure. So being able to capture that and use the tooling you've got to be able to articulate that. So your discovery, looking at your digital footprint, who's connected to. Once critical assets are scoped, the next step, discovery, focuses on continuously identifying and enumerating all these assets, the vulnerabilities, potential attack vectors across the entire digital estate. This is going to provide like a holistic view of what your environment's attack surface looks like, and it's always changing. So this is happening kind of in real time. When you add new equipment, devices, these capabilities pick up on these things and kind of update you. And that gives you the ability to operationalize, like put into process the discovery. This exposure graph lays out the nodes, the exposures, which ones are kind of scoped as critical, what is where's the data coming and going to, the relationships in between these devices, like an app server connecting to a database. There's a relationship there, and this would kind of manifest that and inform how you've prioritized these and map them all out and kind of spider diagram them together. It's kind of an important part of the the picture. And then priority, putting the prioritization of what matters most. If I had my way, if we all had our way, and budget and time were unlimited, everything would be important. If we're zero trust savvy, we have to treat everything like it's compromised and work backwards. So that's everything. But the world doesn't roll like that. The world has got an appetite for risk and a budget that has to deal with it that way. So reality kicks in, and we have to be able to prioritize, and you want to be able to focus your tooling, your attention. And CTEM puts that powerful tool together to be able to manage the exposure and the risk around your appetite more where it matters most. And the way you operationalize that, CTEM is continuously aggregating posture data and insights, and it's feeding us this information. So this picture you're seeing here is the scenarios, the devices, the unit counts on vulnerabilities, and the mapping of these things as they relate to priority. And so when we look about if our business was harmed, which of these assets could harm us the most? That's your scope and your discovery, and then the prioritization. How quickly should we act on tackling these things if I only have so many people and time and automation? Like I said, reality and the budget kind of drives some of those choices, those decisions that we kind of sometimes have to make. But there's tooling here that allows us to build these playbooks out and to tackle things. And then testing your defenses, the validation stage of CTEM is where organizations test their security controls, confirm the viability and potential impact of these attack paths. This is a hands-on work. This can be automated, and there's a lot of automation and tooling that can help us with this. But Microsoft's security exposure management allows us to create that scenario and test those defenses in that tooling, and validate that if something landed on this, here's how it could be successful, and give you that feedback before, God forbid, something happens. So there are ways to operationalize that. And what I'm every one of these steps, these stages, has a how do I go about operationalizing this? And when we share this deck with you all, I've got pages of notes that are associated with every one of these. I tried to even read a few areas for you, but I'm trying to explain as a high level 101 level to get you introduced to CTEM as a general thing. And then you can drill into that. We can come back to this later. There's more here than a half an hour can cover. But there's a couple of things that are leave behinds for you. We'll make sure you know about them towards the end of this thing. But this deck is one of them. The notes that are in here give you the steps to take to operationalize each one of these phases with your teams and put things to action, not just blah, blah, blah marketing presentation, but actually apply the best practice to each of these things, so that you're not knowing where to begin. You at least will have a good basis for how to take some next steps. One of the things that's kind of a playbook is probably the easiest, the best correlation I can make to this picture, but it's taking action, taking a defined action. So if this than that. So those of you who are familiar with, say, NIST incident response, or some of the standards, and even ASACA would call this out, like prevent, detect, investigate, respond, the life cycle around incident management. Some frameworks expand upon that and kind of imply a lessons learned at the tail end of it to improve the life cycle. But by and large, these are all kind of around prevent it, detect it, investigate what happened, respond to it, resolve it. So the way that we frame this step, like we build playbooks. So CEM not only, or again, Microsoft's security exposure management, these capabilities not only identify the risk, but they also provide the actionable intelligence, the playbook on what to do. So, if extended detection and response, if it's an XDR issue, protect and disrupt across my platforms that aren't, MDR, the endpoint, EDR, that kind of thing. If we have a cloud security issue, this is the playbook that deals with that, like protection from code to runtime, the cloud security, low code, no code, pro code, all that stuff. Artificial intelligence and the playbook, and underneath these, it kind of trees out to become like an individualized playbook that not only just shows you these categorizations of types of things that are going on as part of your environment, but the execution steps that kind of feed into that. Those things are all articulated inside CEM, and there's the operationalization of it is complex without some tooling to help us keep order to the chaos, kind of build the playbooks. Your environment may have Sentinel today. It may have the defenders. It may have all the elements of CEM, and just orchestrating that in the playbook. So your defender for cloud, your defender for the vulnerability management, which is built into the CEM's interface. So you're interfacing all these tools through one dashboard, and it's pretty powerful. So this is kind of the picture there on what this area of CTEM and Microsoft's response to that is. And now there's a kind of what brings it back to a standpoint of maybe sense of urgency, not with you all here, but it's making us think about things. Managing the AI attack surface, prompt injection, data leakage, overprivileged co-pilots. One client said, "Oh yeah, we're not using AI tools." And we ran CASB, or Defender for Cloud Apps. Run it in your own environment. If you want to know what your employees are doing, it's not about snooping. It's around you run IT, and it's about what tools do I have to let me see all the GPTs that are being run. There's 1,000 tools out there, no name brand and very well known brands that aren't Microsoft or are Microsoft. Cloud App Security, or Defender for Cloud Apps, is what it's called today. I keep always calling it CASB because that's what we always called it. But Defender for Cloud Apps allows you to tell me the use cases of third-party AI tools, bots, agents, GPTs, chat tools, whatever. And one client that said to us, it happens a lot. It's not any one client, it's there. They were convinced that, no, we have a policy that says we don't do it. And we're doing an assessment for them. We, lit up CASB and showed them that there were, it was a fairly large estate. It was several thousand employees. And there were several hundred different tools being used within their estate. You could have expected that I was going to say that, because it's kind of Captain Obvious thing, lead up to the punchline. But the point is, there's lots of tools being used, and the best thing is to know what's going on and put those guardrails around it. You can curb that. You can have sanctioned AI apps and ones that you don't allow, unsanctioned. And you can, implement that. You kind of want a policy, you want to set up those things, but CASB is your tool. It tells you everything you need to know about how to put guardrails up to protect your estate from kind of unauthorized use of GPT tools. A public GPT like OpenAI or ChatGPT public, the free one, you're the fee. Your data is the fee. It teaches the model. And that's not the same as Azure OpenAI. That one is your private Idaho. That's your sensitive data stays inside. But when people use the OpenAI, they're actually interacting with a thing that lets the world model get smarter. Then the price you pay for that feature is by you're contributing to the learning of it. So that's not new. That's several years old. But if people are using that, your data is already going out there, and it's very hard to get that back. So data leakage, overprivileged co-pilots kind of being able to see things they're not, even Copilot inside Microsoft Copilot 365, GPT, ChatGPT inside Copilot Studio. You want to have baseline guardrails, and the elephant that's in the room is we can't talk about exposure management without this new the new engine driving it, which is AI. And as we adopt AI, our attack surface expands. So we have to secure the AI supply chain, the information flow, and vulnerabilities will come in there. It's not a news story. It's actually fairly old. Old in AI terms is maybe a month. It's evolving so fast. But an actor created a GPT created code or AI created code. I think they might have used Claude or Gemini, something, to create. And that's not a flaw on those tools. It's the power that they all have to create an attack vector, create a 0-day attack against a target, and learn from that. And when it tried it and it wasn't successful, it adapted and wrote code on the fly to just be persistent. And it's like a runaway train. So those are the kind of scary stories. We've all seen them, heard them, suspect them. None of us want to see them. But some things that AI can do can be pretty profound, especially around the use case of creating exposure exploiting code. There's a vulnerability. AI can find that crack in the armor very quickly and penetrate it. So that's the point we're trying to make here. And what I'm trying to say is, if you consider like these overprivileged co-pilots, and in a traditional world, if I had access to the sensitive HR, I wouldn't. How do we? It's the obscurity thing, is what I'm trying to get at. Poorly said. If I didn't have access to knowing where the data was, then I wouldn't be able to see internal data of employee payroll, stuff like that. That is an old model, and it's not a model. It's a weakness. It's a flaw. It's tech debt that we often talk about. We moved to the cloud so fast. We had to get from point A to point B so fast that we didn't have time to catch security up, and it's internal. So let's not worry about the file share that holds HR data. We just won't tell people where the folder is, and then the AI tool will find it. And we do those assessments every day, hundreds of times a month. And we're showing clients that oversharing is real and legit, and it exists, and it comes from tech debt. And that also carries over into our vulnerability. And believe me, actors are using AI to kind of penetrate those gaps that exist. So what we kind of have to do is switch from, the old rationale of the buffer overflow, the unpatched CVEs, is the software broken, to is the software doing exactly what it told it to do, but it's doing it maliciously. So think about that. The example here, I wrote it out for you to see it and kind of read it. What if an employee asked, summarize the, Q3 layoff strategy, and Copilot does it because the file wasn't locked down? It's not a hacking incident, but it's kind of an issue. The user that ran that might have been curious, not a crook. But you see the point, or I hope you see the point, that use cases of AI don't always, of malicious or bad use cases of AI don't have to be malicious. They could be accidental, or, a thing where a capability that we bring to our employees without the right guardrails on it, it could do exactly the job we've asked it to do. And then, then we're looking at that with a regret after it happens. Like I said, it's something we always want to avoid. One, you need to be prepared for how to deal with it, and all that comes from is, it really was, the tool might have had some lack of guardrails, but it was attributed to a governance failure. There was no governance that kind of structured that. The tooling that comes along with that rolls up to governance, not the other way around. So I wanted to kind of mention this, the AI set in the vulnerability topic is very important, not just from the bad actors are using AI to harm us and target us, but the use cases that AI can become a bug more so than a feature sometimes, because it could reveal things that we don't necessarily want to happen, but it did what it was asked to do. This picture here is kind of what, this is the iceberg, the quintessential iceberg. The idea is there's a lot of complexity below the surface of the water. Above the surface, your users interact, and where low code, no code, pro code plays. It's an IT picture more than it is an AI picture. Take the word AI out of this whole thing, and it could be an IT frame. Your users use applications, they log in, they can write queries against databases, and then underneath the surface of the water is all that feature structure that protects, and CEM is part of that, or CTEM in the industry vernacular is there. And so what we're looking at is there is a commonality in a stack that can be leveraged to help, keep things streamlined, make logic out of the chaos that could be hundreds of different tools interacting. And I'm not putting a Microsoft sell on you about consolidating your Microsoft stack. That certainly has an advantage in some cases, but the tooling that you've got is underneath the surface, and it needs to be able to be cognizant of things like AI and things like the potential for shadow AI. That's the point of articulation here. And so when we see the shadow IT, someone buying a Trello license on a company credit card, or standing up a router. Back in my heyday, I saw it in a physical network. We had data centers back in that day, and not so much the cloud. There were cloud things, but we weren't. And someone stood up a switch, a router, and started plugging in servers into that network. That myself and the MIS director, we ran the network for a pretty large enterprise, and we were seeing all these problems. But, well, they didn't configure the router correctly, and the switch was associated with that incorrect setting, and it was causing reflections in our network, and it caused a bit of a panic with our leadership team because we couldn't find it, and we end up using all sorts of technology, time domain reflectometers, all sorts of stuff to try to identify where this router came from that a practice guy bought and plugged it into shadow IT. And it was very costly for us. We were, it hurt the business a little bit. So we very quickly implemented policy. You don't do that. Well, now when the AI, shadow AI is shadow logic. And it's not about users pasting data into GPT. It's about autonomy. And we're not just blocking websites, we're fighting the shadow logic, the code, and decisions generated by AI that might bypass human review. The key there is keep the human in the loop. At this stage, there's autonomy that can help you make decisions, but the best practice is keep a human involved in the loop so AI can't get too carried away with itself and deviate from your game plan. So kind of the shadow IT aspect of and how that comes into the AI conversation. The speed of exposures. We have 30 days to patch this. You might have Qualys, you may have Tenable, you may use Microsoft, you may use some other technology. And what was common, and I think it still is kind of common, is running monthly vulnerability scans and more frequently in higher risk environments, etc. But then having those patches reviewed by a change review board that they always can't happen so quickly after that vulnerability is exposed, brought to bear, surfaced. Hey, there's a vulnerability on these servers. The OS needs patching. Or the application needs patching. Worse still, if it's a custom app that has to go through a dev test and review, that time kills the opportunity to take the surface away from the actors that could target us. So there's a game there. And then automated AI agents can discover and exploit that time window in minutes. So that's what I'm trying to say here. This is the why for CTEM, a continuous threat exposure management, is because the time has changed from, we've got a few days to patch the server. We can run through the change control boards and take action at a comfortable time. There's no more comfort there. It's got to be done kind of at machine speed. So having the automations to say, detect a vulnerability, apply the patch, sequence it to the right team, validate the risk, the classification, those Gartner steps that we talked about: scope, discovery, the classification, that risk appetite. Those first three phases are what we're talking about here, and being able to act on those things in those other two parts, like validate and then mobilize. So it's kind of important to kind of move into the velocity of things when it comes to vulnerability. When we work with clients, we're standing up CTEM as a function of our job. Some of this is written process, some of it is tooling. Some clients don't have all the tooling that you'd want or need. Aligning those things to the frameworks that a client may choose or be subjected to, not by their own choice, but by destination. And then dealing with the monitoring, and then the tool optimization, the tools working together, whether it's CrowdStrike on the endpoint or Defender on the endpoint, and different SIEM or Microsoft Sentinel. It doesn't matter. It matters that they're interacting well together. We do a pretty good job of that, but we're always thinking about attack surface reduction and continuous threat exposure management. So, this is something your own program doesn't need to be Spyglass. It could be your own team, but advising around those vulnerabilities, around the topic of CTEM, 5 categories that Gartner has laid out, the best practices that Microsoft kind of came to the market with a couple of years ago. There's an absolute ton of Microsoft Learn links that help your team explore, use, and deploy the capabilities of Microsoft SIEM, Security Exposure Management, or CTEM, and kind of put those into executable mode. One thing, this has been a hit because it's like a total 3-week calendar, kind of an engagement where we leverage zero trust, an evaluation of zero trust and identity, data, device, app access, and infrastructure. How does an estate sit in? We don't necessarily have to light up signals anymore. We can run a powerful PowerShell script against your estate. You can run those things too, and identify where your mapping is in or out of kilter with the discipline, not a product, but a discipline of zero trust. Populating that to be able to do what if scenarios against that. What if I had Defender turned on, configured? Would it make that problem go away? We do those kind of exercises all the time, and we do that in this type of engagement. But we're not doing it for the benefit is the overarching roadmap. But what we're doing it for is to make sure we fully understand that tech debt that exists before you take a step or before you get too far down the path of an AI journey. So we call it a secure AI quick start, because we're also coupling, working with business users on creating some of the AI use cases. Your business users know what they'd like to use AI for, or they might need to see a few examples to be able to get the wheel moving. So you kind of get their ideas. It's almost like when I got introduced to AI, it was a few years back in prompting. I didn't know what a prompt was. Like everyone, you have to start somewhere. And then someone showed me what one looked like. And when I saw that, it's a vulnerable moment I'm giving you right now, me. When someone showed me what one looked like, then it got me thinking about how I could leverage it. And then my use cases exploded. And I'm a pretty savvy, heavy duty user of AI to help my day-to-day, not just interact with me, but keep track of my day, not just the productivity stuff, but we use it for work too. We don't manipulate client data with it, but we help it form an understanding of what security risks are in the work we do for our clients from a security standpoint. And it makes us faster. It gives us the ability to operate. But being a human, you have to see it for the first time. And a few years back, when I was getting introduced to GPT and the like, I needed to see what one looked like. And we presumed that even as far in as the world has gotten into AI use cases, so we combined some use case development, triaging your use cases to help you guys get more out of your AI journey and some of those prompts and prompt school, if you will. And then, of course, the data protection schema, being able to look at the data estate, make sure it's stood up properly and so forth, so that the guardrails are on. And if an employee asks that question about, tell me the workforce reduction plan for the next quarter, they're not going to get answers that stuff that people shouldn't see or wouldn't be authorized to see. AI, I don't need to repeat that. You guys know that flaw comes from tech debt. And so when we can put the guardrails in place and have those things in place, then AI behaves the way we want. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's a benefit. and it works as intended within the guardrails that it's been instructed. So few people give instructions to their GPT prompts. They just say, go do it for me. And there's no instruction on how to fence it off, or no guardrails in the framework, so that can run away. And it can produce kind of terrible results as well. But at the same time, it can also reveal sensitive data that you don't want. So we do this 3-week engagement for clients, and it stands up all those things, including the vulnerabilities that, illustrate where the need for work is, in a priority. And then, of course, that, leads to roadmaps and things of that nature. I want to give you a few things that are, like, we covered a bunch. There'll be a lot in the handouts that we'll make available for you here as a result of this engagement, this webinar. But on the topic of scope, discovery, priority, and then validation and mobilization, there's a Monday. We're close enough to Friday to call it for next Monday. Kind of get these slides, take a look at them, ask your team these questions next Monday. Do we have an updated list of our top 10 most crown jewel assets? Do we have that? Can we see shadow AI, unmanaged co-pilots, that use case? Have we lit up CASB to tell us where those things are in our environment today? Could you see that? If we sat and had a private consult, could you show me your tenant and show me everyone using the AI tools that you want them to use, or are they using unsanctioned ones that could be revealing data outside the estate? Prioritization. Are we patching based on the CVV score or the actual exploitability of that? It kind of needs to be on the exploitability on that. Something bad could happen, and this is how it could impact our business if it were to be successful. And that is where we prioritize. We want to get them all, but again, remember, we're dealing with budgets, we're dealing with too few people often, and too few automations to get the job done. So all of that said, we have to pick and choose our battles. Everything gets resolved, but how quickly and what priority? You want to ask your team that question. When was the last time, for validation, when was the last time we validated an attack path, like a what-if scenario setup, where we use some of these tools like SEM to help create a topic like cloud security or cloud application hosting, GitHub, and carry out a scenario, what-if scenarios on what would happen if this attack were carried out this way or that way, without having a pen test come in and capture the flag and test it. That's certainly one test. It's a point in time test. It will usually target one thing, but your team wants to kind of run those validation scenarios against your vulnerabilities and your priorities and say, let's validate some attack path, and use the tools to help build out those playbooks that I described, the scenarios to help you explore that. And then lastly, mobilizing. Does IT operations understand why we're asking them to patch these specific servers right now? That's where we get that call to action, and everyone's kind of stepping up to the plate. I think I want to close this off, one, by saying thank you for sitting with me here and kind of running through this stuff. And if you took one thing with you, the checklist, the questions, grab the leave behinds. I mean, we do this type of work across our business for hundreds of clients. Quisitive's managed services is a picture here. We're not just in the security business, we're also in the modern work, the cloud, the AI business. So some of the things that I shared here come from lots of different viewpoints brought into one one area. Challenge us, reach out to us. We can meet. Doesn't cost you anything to follow up with us and talk about some of the things that may resonate. Maybe you want to explore further, but connect with us so we can kind of go down those paths of the journey with you. And maybe there's some way we can help you. Maybe not. Maybe just answering your questions or helping, guide your journey. That's fine too.